Coruscant is well known among Star Wars fans for its status as a Eucomanopolis, an entire planet covered by a single city. But Coruscant wasn't the only Eucomanopolis in the Star Wars galaxy, not by a long shot. In the core worlds alone, there was also Alsacan, Shorkin, Humberine, and Ixtla. There were even Eucomanopolises in remote regions of the Outer Rim, Taris and Eriadu among them. There was also Nar Shaddaa. Nar Shaddaa was fairly different from the likes of Coruscant. It was a Hutt world, and as slimy as you'd expect a Hutt world to be. But at the same time, Nar Shaddaa was far more similar to Coruscant than any core worlder would have ever admitted. The Smugglers Moon, as it was often called, was a world with a dark history, a monument to the corruption of the Hutts. In this video, we'll be telling its story.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
Years before the Galactic Republic was even an idea, the Hutts left their homeworld of Val to establish an empire. They conquered a broad swath of space and enslaved entire species, laying claim to their worlds, their resources, and their very lives. The Hutt Empire wanted the might to openly challenge the Republic. Instead, it annihilated itself. 15,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, a series of conflicts called the Hutt Cataclysms tore the Hutt Empire apart. Nobody knows exactly how the cataclysms played out, but by the end of the conflict, the Hutt Empire was dead, Hutt space was greatly reduced, and Val had been turned into a charred, airless rock orbiting a white dwarf. Following this disaster, the Hutts completely reformed their society, reconstituting the ruins of the Hutt Empire into the Hutt domain, which was a front for the Hutt cartel we all know and love. The Hutts planned to reorganize their society into one based on economic competition and the criminal underworld instead of conquest. Before these reforms could set in, however, the Hutts needed a new homeworld. Of course, because nobody could have nice things in the Outer Rim, the Hutts decided they wanted an inhabited planet as their new homeworld. They laid claim to Evokar, a swamp-covered world south of Val, and manipulated the native Zez-Kai into selling more and more of their planet until the Hutts owned it all. Renaming the planet Nal Hutta, meaning glorious jewel, the Hutts drove most of the native Zez-Kai onto the planet's sole habitable moon and then enslaved or exterminated the rest. The Zez-Kai left on Nal Hutta were worked to death at building great cities and palaces for the Hutts. When Nal Hutta had been developed to the Hutts' satisfaction, the Hutts had the surviving Zez-Kai repeat the process with the moon, which the Hutts had renamed Nar Shaddaa. The Hutts had a vision for Nar Shaddaa. While Nal Hutta was to be their new throne world, the exclusive domain of the Hutt species, Nar Shaddaa would be its gaping maw, a great starport from which they could coordinate their criminal empire. To that end, the Hutts had the Zez-Kai and other slaves build a massive city on Nar Shaddaa that covered the entire moon, one of the densest and tallest Eucomanopolises in the galaxy. In around 14,500 BBY, work on the city was completed. By that point, very few Zez-Kai were left alive. These survivors were driven into Nar Shaddaa's undercity, where they degenerated into sickly mutants, forced to live in the sewers and survive off scraps from the surface. After a few centuries, these surviving Zez-Kai were almost completely forgotten about, and the species was deemed extinct. The genocide of the Zez-Kai was just the start of Nar Shaddaa's troubled history. In the millennia after Nar Shaddaa's transformation into a city planet, it became home to a massive population. The White Tube system, which contained Nal Hutta and Nar Shaddaa, ended up becoming the nexus of several major hyperspace routes, the most important of which was the Utmian Pabol, which connected Hutt space with the Republic. Nar Shaddaa became the Utmian Pabol's effective endpoint, which turned it into a hub of trade between the Hutts and the Republic. Such an arrangement would have made any other world extremely wealthy. In this case, however, it made the Hutts extremely wealthy, while the people of Nar Shaddaa got very little out of the arrangement. Beings from all over the Outer Rim settled on Nar Shaddaa hoping to get rich, only to learn the hard way that Nar Shaddaa belonged to the Hutt cartel, and the only ones profiting on the moon were its slimy overlords. Insult was added to injury in around 4000 BBY when a supernova in the Kier system made the Utmian Pabol completely unnavigable. The route was eventually recharted, but Nar Shaddaa was never the same. Any legitimate trade the moon had once had vanished with the hyperspace route, and a rapidly growing collection of smugglers and criminal organizations moved in to fill the power vacuum. Soon enough, Nar Shaddaa wasn't just at the mercy of the Hutts, but also the Exchange and 100 other cartels. This doomed Nar Shaddaa to be forever a shadow port. Even after the Utmian Pabol was re-established, nobody legitimate wanted to do business with the Smugglers Moon. The history of Nar Shaddaa didn't end there, of course, but let's put the story on pause for a moment to discuss what the moon was like. Like Coruscant, Nar Shaddaa was a vertical city, which meant that not only was the whole moon covered in city, but the city blocks were also stacked atop each other. On some parts of Nar Shaddaa, docks and refueling spires stretched into outer space, allowing ships to offload their cargo without entering the atmosphere. Nar Shaddaa was unlike Coruscant, however, in that not even its upper levels were clean and safe. The entire moon could be considered the bad part of town. Most of it was a gigantic slum, and the supposed high-end districts were absolutely infested with crime lords and similar sorts of scum. Nar Shaddaa was divided up into sectors, with some of the more well-known ones including the flashy Corellian sector, the rundown Duro sector, and the absolute pit known as the refugee sector. The relatively nice parts of Nar Shaddaa were on the side of the moon tidally locked to Nal Hutta, while the dark side of the moon was, somewhat fittingly, home to the most dangerous sectors. There was no real government on Nar Shaddaa, though it was nominally ruled by the Hutt domain. The cartels made the rules on the Smugglers Moon. Since there weren't any laws, nothing was illegal on Nar Shaddaa, though many things could earn you a blaster bolt to the head. Contrary to what you might expect, however, this lawlessness was actually beneficial to the moon's economy. A lot of interplanetary corporations, especially ones that made weapons, tested their products in facilities on Nar Shaddaa where they could escape regulation. A lot of the advanced technology in the galaxy was actually developed on Nar Shaddaa, albeit in secret. Nar Shaddaa was one of only a few densely populated worlds on which humans were a small minority. Of the moon's population of about 100 billion, less than 20% of the population was human, while non-humans of a myriad of species composed the remainder. There were members of nearly every species in the galaxy on Nar Shaddaa, as well as many hybrids and mutants. Many non-humans actually came to Nar Shaddaa with the express purpose of living on a world where humans were marginalized instead of the majority. As you can expect, this led to rampant abuses against the moon's human population. Hate crimes against humans were common, and humans were often systematically disenfranchised and forced into poor, rundown sectors of the city. Nar Shaddaa also became home to a great many refugees over the years, most notably during the Old Sith Wars. Refugees, especially human ones, were forced to live in the most appalling conditions imaginable, such that many willingly sold themselves into slavery in the hopes for a better life. That leads us back to Nar Shaddaa's history. In 3951 BBY, during the Dark Wars, Nar Shaddaa's refugee sector had become borderline overcrowded. Millions had ended up on Nar Shaddaa after losing their homes in the Mandalorian Wars and the Jedi Civil War. Hidden among them was a refugee of another sort, a Jedi Master named Zez-Kai, who was in hiding due to the ongoing First Jedi Purge. At the time, the refugee sector was controlled by the Exchange, a criminal outfit that had grown powerful under the leadership of Goto, an elusive boss who managed his affairs from a cloaked star yacht in orbit. Believing the Jedi to be all but extinct, Goto placed an enormous bounty on any surviving Jedi and hired whole armies of bounty hunters to bring them to him. His lieutenants also put pressure on the refugees on Nar Shaddaa, believing their suffering might draw out the last of the Jedi. The bounty on Jedi attracted the attention of Mitra Surik, the Jedi exile, after multiple would-be bounty hunters attempted to capture her and bring her to Nar Shaddaa. Like the badass she was, Surik decided to stroll right into the dragon's jaws, touching down in Nar Shaddaa's refugee sector and immediately getting to work in helping the refugees. Upon learning that she had come to Nar Shaddaa, Goto declared a truce, wanting to assess Surik before the bounty hunters made a move. The tension between the hunters was palpable. Some of the deadliest in the business were on Nar Shaddaa to hunt the Jedi. Among them, the Mad Wookiee Henha, the Twi'lek twin sons, an army of Duros called the Zhug brothers, an entire tribe of Gand, and numerous squads of HK-50 assassin droids. Mira, another bounty hunter, was also keeping tabs on Surik, though not for Goto. Mitra Surik and her companions made a serious dent in exchange operations on Nar Shaddaa, significantly improving the lives of the refugees in the process. In frustration, the exchange boss, Sakwesh, arranged a meeting with Surik, which the exile hoped would get her into a room with Goto so she could put an end to the bounty. When the bounty hunters learned of this, however, they believed the exchange had double-crossed them. An open war began in the streets of Nar Shaddaa as the bounty hunter truce was called off, with each hunter seeking to be the first to capture the Jedi. Surik managed to evade them all, however, and made it to Goto on her own. While aboard his yacht, Surik shut off Goto's cloaking device, allowing the enraged bounty hunters to pinpoint its location. As the exile made a hasty exit, the hunters closed on the yacht and blew it to smithereens, crippling the exchange and affecting the course of commerce in the Yutub sector for decades to come. Surik briefly returned to Nar Shaddaa after this for a meeting with Zez-Kai, whom she recruited to help rebuild the Jedi Order. Nar Shaddaa remained much the same after this whole turn of events, as even though the exchange slowly faded, other syndicates rose to take its place. It remained a shadow port through to the time of the Clone Wars and gave rise to many famous outlaws over the millennia, Aurra Sing and Han Solo among them. Through war and peace, republic and empire, Nar Shaddaa was always Nar Shaddaa, the greatest hive of scum and villainy in the universe. But what do you think? Are there other Hutt worlds you'd like us to talk about? Maybe Nal Hutta? Feel free to post your thoughts in the comments section below. And as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.